Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Copeland, and I greet you on behalf of the North Carolina Council of Churches, which represents 18 denominations across North Carolina. So we are everywhere in North Carolina, large towns and small towns, big cities, rural areas, Black, brown, and white churches. Pretty much everywhere you go in North Carolina, you can find somebody who works with the North Carolina Council of Churches. And today we're happy to host this webinar with the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, where they will tell us what we can do to help the refugees that are coming to our nation. I can say a lot about refugees, but I would point you first and foremost back to Scripture, back to the places where God has said to us, take care of vulnerable people. And God names three groups of vulnerable people over and over and over again in Scripture. He names widows, orphans, and refugees. In Scripture, refugees are often called immigrants, sometimes sojourners, and also in other places, refugees. But the word is in many ways interchangeable. And the reason that God has pointed out to us the need to care for these vulnerable people is because in those days when Scripture was composed, the refugee, the immigrant, the sojourner had no rights in the community, no reason for being protected, except out of the goodness of God's heart, calling on those of us who had also, at other times in our lives, been refugees or immigrants or sojourners. So we come at this as people of faith, called by a God of grace and love to hear about the needs of our neighbors, those who are coming to us, hoping to be welcome, needing to be loved, and gathered in the arms of those of us who follow God. I say all that to welcome you here and to introduce to you three people from the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society who will tell us what we can do as people of faith to become more involved. First, Andrea Gagney, who is the Senior Program Manager, and then next, Marian Abernathy, who is part of the Welcome Circle or the Private Sponsor Coordinator, can tell us how we can be sponsors and get more involved. And finally, Charlotte Schertz, who is the Outreach Coordinator for Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Friends, we are glad to have you here, and we are happy to be partnering with our new friends at Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. I'm going to turn it over now to Andrea Gagney, who will lead us in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you to all of you who have come here today to learn more about this program. Just showing up today and hearing about the options that are available to help people in need is such an incredible first step. And so I'm so glad to see such a beautiful turnout. So I'm just going to very quickly.
Here we are. Can everybody see that screen? I just shared it. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about some of these people who are in these vulnerable situations that was so eloquently described by Jennifer. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot at the need that we have that we're facing in the world today right now. I thought that this would be a really important way to center the conversation because it's really quite staggering to see some of these numbers. Every single moment that we experience is the moment in modern history when there are more displaced people than ever before, which is startling to hear. There's currently 108.4 million forcibly displaced people globally, which is 1 in every 74 people on this earth. 35.3 million have been legally recognized as refugees. In the contrast to that, there are also fewer solutions than ever before. Compared to that 108 million people displaced, in the first 6 months of 2023, 38,600 people were resettled in the US. I want to just pause again. 38,653 people out of 108 million. That is why we're here to talk about private sponsorship today, because people who are displaced in the current system don't have solutions to rebuild their lives, and private sponsorship gives us, regular everyday Americans, the chance to step up and say, I want to help. I want to do something. And for years we've said, call your elected officials, reach out to a local agency and see if they have need. And now for the first time, we're able to say you're actually able to step up and welcome a refugee yourselves. Next slide, please. So the Welcome Corps program, the private sponsorship program that we're here to talk about today, was just announced this year, and it's the biggest expansion to refugee resettlement in the US in the last 40 years. It allows everyday Americans to sponsor refugees through the actual US refugee admissions program, the same program that other refugees are coming through. And so the people who form a private sponsorship group work with a private sponsorship organization like HIAS to get training and guidance and support and oversight to know that you're doing the right things. And you're able to actually be the caseworkers welcoming people. Refugees sponsored through this program have all of the same benefits as every other refugee that comes to the United States, the same access to benefits and the same pathway to citizenship. And you provide financial, emotional, and resettlement support to these folks as they are arriving. And I'm very happy to turn it over to Charlotte to talk a little bit about what this looks like in practice.
Thank you for having us. So yes, I'm Charlotte. And just to give you a little bit more details on the phases of the program. This program is different in that in phase 1 of the program, which is happening right now, welcome circles are able to be matched with refugees that they do not know, but who are already in the US resettlement pipeline. And at the moment, these individuals are arriving. They have started to arrive, and they come from sub-Saharan African countries. However, in phase 2 of the program, people are going to be able to identify refugees that they know and that they wish to sponsor. And that is the sort of revolutionary part of this program. And that piece is going to start at the end of this year. And then we're going to get more information about it in September. But phase 2 of the program is very different in that refugees who live here in the US are going to be able to sponsor their relatives or their friends who up to now did not have a solution. And then for churches and private sponsor groups like you, if you are interested, you will be able to provide a solution to individuals who are currently in Africa without any solution, who would otherwise probably linger in refugee camps or unsafe situations for a really long time. Those kind of 2 pieces of the program are really different and provide a new solution that just has not existed in the past, and that is very exciting. Now, in terms of the responsibilities for the private sponsor groups, which I'm sure is what everybody is wondering about today, is this is great, but what are we supposed to do? Well, if you are interested and you want to form a private sponsor group with your church or your family or whoever else, there are 3 pieces really that would be your responsibility. The first piece is the financial support. Of course, this is a sponsorship, so there is a fundraising piece that you have to commit to. And then there is the resettlement support piece, where you will essentially replace the case managers in refugee agencies who have traditionally done this work. You will have the opportunity to do this for the very first time. And then, of course, there is the emotional support, which I think is one of the reasons why many people come to this work, is to be able to provide the kind of support that will be beneficial to the refugees and will be an incredible experience to you. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to my colleague, Marian, who's going to go into more details about each of those little bubbles that we have here. So the first one, Marian, is financial support.
Great, thank you. I wonder if folks can either raise your hand or write in the chat if you've already been doing refugee resettlement work. I know that a lot of churches and community groups throughout North Carolina have been really active in doing this work. And just to get a sense of whether this is something new, I saw one hand go up. So great. So I don't want to be telling you all things that you already know as we do this. And I'm glad to see so many folks are interested in doing it. So the financial support piece, I have found is actually in many ways the easiest piece. The number that's there for the requirement that comes in is $2,375 per refugee who arrives. And that number is based on the number that the United States government pays to refugee resettlement agencies for 90 days of resettlement support. And half of that money normally goes in the regular pathway to the agency, and half is used directly for the services to the newcomers. So paying rent, buying furniture if that's needed, groceries, clothing, et cetera, during that 3-month period. So we know that that number is actually not necessarily what it really might cost. In some places it's going to cost more, and in some places it's going to cost less, maybe a little bit less. It may depend whether it's a single person coming and covering the entire rent of an apartment on their own, or if it's a large family, in which case maybe they don't actually need quite that much. But the Welcome Circles highest works for the last year and a half with private sponsorship through a program called Sponsor Circles, or we call Welcome Circles. And so we've got some information about how private sponsorship has worked, and found that each of the groups actually raised a little bit more than that amount per person and spent right around that much over a 6-month period. So doubling the amount for the 6-month period. Reality is that the costs are going to vary by location. The costs of living in a large city are going to cost more than in a smaller place where their housing costs might be less. There's some startup costs, paying utilities or paying deposits for utilities and for rent that cost more at the very beginning, maybe buying a phone for the newcomers so that they have a phone and are able to get around on their own, and then their monthly ongoing expenses. But we're seeing that $23.75 per person is fairly accurate. It does say here a 3-month minimum. Welcome Corps is for a 3-month period is what the government's program is. Our sense is that it really takes more than 90 days for newcomers to be resettled, and we recommend a 6-month sponsorship. Next slide, please. In terms of resettlement support, it's really, as Charlotte said, it's everything that a resettlement agency would be doing, from finding and securing housing, furnishing it, stocking the refrigerator and the pantry, providing all the basic necessities of a house, shower curtains, toilet paper, receiving the newcomers at the airport, working with them on essential documentation to make sure that they get social security numbers and have all of the paperwork that they need to work and live in the United States, enrolling them in benefits. And we work with you to build a welcome plan that goes through all of these issues. So you're not sort of surprised they've arrived, you're starting to figure it out, but you're planning in advance to go through all of these pieces, including developing a budget. So I'm not going to read through each and every one of these elements. And those of you who've been doing this work or are doing this work right now know what these pieces are going forward. But really your goal is to help them transition to self-sufficiency as quickly as is possible, while providing emotional and social support. And I think this is the piece where it's an incredible value add for both the welcomes for the private sponsor group volunteers, but for the newcomers. So the newcomers coming in with a resettlement agency do not get this level of resettlement support. They have a case manager who's seeing multiple newcomers at the same time and doesn't have a ton of time to put in really providing that kind of emotional support and getting to know them. This offers refugees coming in now. There'll be actual legal refugees, meaning they've got a pathway to permanent residency and citizenship, which is different than the way recent private sponsorship has been for newcomers from Afghanistan and Ukraine who've come in with a status called humanitarian parole. So these refugees are coming in and really wanting to rebuild their lives in safety. But things are new. It's very different for people who've been living on in a refugee camp for years, sometimes decades, sometimes their entire lives. Living in an apartment or in a small house feels very different. There's a lot of things that are new. Life in the United States can feel very isolating compared to being in a group setting where they may have been coming from. So this is a fabulous opportunity to help them to have community. And you're there to listen, support them that are not alone. I just went through some data from our Afghan newcomers who just talked about the friendship and doing things and having people they can call and who can explain things to them was just so reassuring and important for them in a really important way. So that's really a plus. And then I will say from my own congregation in Durham that sponsored 4 Afghan families and is sponsoring a Ukrainian family right now. When we did a reflection exercise after we completed the 6 months with each of the 4 families, people really reflected on what this experience has meant for them as a congregation, as a member of a congregation, and just felt that it was incredibly important in building connections to each other, to the congregation and to the community. We all learned a lot about what services exist. I think it built a compassion and empathy in all of us for people who are less fortunate, and also to each other, particularly coming out of the pandemic. And for new people in our congregation, it was a great way to connect and build connections. So with that, I will turn it back, I think, to Charlotte.
Yep. Thank you, Marion. That was really great. Yes, I think the opportunity is wonderful for the newcomers, wonderful for the individuals, but you're right, it's an amazing opportunity for people within the church or congregation to connect with each other. So if you're interested, kind of what are the next steps and how do you form a welcome circle? What are the pieces that come as part of your application process? So the first requirement, of course, is to form your group. You have to have a minimum of 5 individuals, up to a maximum of 10, but we find that sort of the sweet spot, the perfect number is 8 people. Each member has to pass a background check. That background check is an online background check, so really convenient, $15 per person. You have to take an online training. Of course, we recommend that all core members of the group take the training, but for the application purposes, you only need to have one person complete the full training and upload the certificate. As Marion talked about, there is the welcome plan, which is probably the biggest piece of your application that you have to put together. And the welcome plan, again, outlines how you plan on basically doing the services, the list of services, that long list that you saw. How do you plan on delivering that service? And so you have to provide quite a bit of detail on that. But again, our team supports you, and we even provide a sample welcome plan so that you can see how other successful groups have done this in the past. So you're not alone in creating that welcome plan. Marion said the government really for the program asks for 90 days, 3 months. We find that a minimum of 6 months commitment is more realistic, and it's overall better in terms of transition, integration, and making a home for the newcomers. You sign a code of conduct, a commitment form that is just additional documentation. And then once you have done all of that, once I have worked in gathering all of those pieces with you, Then one of my colleagues like Marion or Andrea will review your entire application, will review your welcome plan, and we provide feedback. We meet with you and we provide feedback so that your application is robust and gets submitted successfully to the Welcome Corps program and team. The other support that we provide as your private sponsor organization, that is the way the program works, where you are a private sponsor group and you have to be partnering with a private sponsor organization like HIAS. And what we do for you and with you during that time is we provide that staff support, again, the pre-application I just talked about. And then once your family is here, we provide 3 months of support and then even additional up to 6 months after. But the first 3 months intensely, we are present. You are assigned one of our staff members that has regular check-ins with you. You can go to our weekly office hours where every week for an hour, we have a Zoom meeting where people can pop in and out, ask their questions, get staff advice, and also meet with other private sponsor groups who are doing this work throughout the country. You get access to our online platform where it's kind of our own private Facebook or online page where you get to talk with other groups throughout the country, and you get access to all of our resources and training that we have created over the last 2 years specifically for this work. And then the last thing I want to say about who we are at HIAS and what we can do is that we have been doing this work for a very long time, not me personally, obviously, but for 140 years, HIAS has been resettling refugees. We are the oldest resettlement in the US, so we have a lot of expertise in this work, expertise as well in private sponsorship. We've, in the last 2 years during the Afghan and Ukrainian crises, we've worked and created and led over 100 private sponsor groups, like potentially you. Through our expertise, we've also got the honor of now being the co-chair of the PSO Council. So all of the other organizations like us out there who are doing this work, we get to co-chair the council of those organizations by providing training, support, and best practices again, that we've gained through our years of experience. And then you also, with us, get support through our national partnerships. So we have a partnership with Airbnb, for example. So you get, if you need it, free 30 days of Airbnb when the family arrives. We know that housing is a huge problem for everyone nationally, and the work of refugee resettlement hasn't been spared. There is also issues with housing. So Airbnb helps with that for free for 30 days. We have a partnership with Rosetta Stone if you want to learn the language of the newcomer. We also have a discount through Language Line, which is an interpretation line. So if you need to have important conversations where the language barrier just cannot be present, you have a discount with that line. And in the sponsor fund, if you struggle with fundraising, you can get up to $5,000 of support with that funding. So again, all that to say that you are not alone in this work. If you're thinking that this is something that you're really interested in, but you're nervous and you don't want to do this alone, you will not be alone. HIAS's entire team is there to support you in that. So I think we are actually perfectly on time, which is great. So if you're interested in finding out more, you have my email address here. I'm going to put it as well in the chat if you want to just copy and paste it, if that's easier. I would love to talk to you about the next steps and get you going. And then, of course, we have time for questions right now, if there are any. I think you can unmute yourself if you'd like, or just put them in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can maybe all see each other.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name's Paula. I am in Illinois, and because of the time change, I totally blew it and missed this whole thing. So I was wondering if this will be like online or anything.
Yes, this is being recorded, so you can watch it. And today we will, Rachel is kindly going to send the recording of this. And also, if you have additional questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to chat with you.
Okay, I'm so sorry I missed it. I was looking forward to it. I'm glad you're going to do that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you.
This is Lisa in Hillsborough. Our church has been sponsoring refugees, but we have a free ESL program, and our interpreter is Afghan, and she has two female relatives that she needs to get to the US. And I don't believe that they have applied for refugee status or anything. Do they need to do that before that phase 2 steps, takes whole, we can go into phase 2 and request specific refugees?
Thank you. I see somebody else has also asked that question, so I'm going to let Andrea tell you just a bit more about phase 2 with the tiny bit of information we have right now.
So towards the end of next month, start of September, we'll be able to give you really good specific information. But the government at this time has not released all of these details yet that you'll really need to know to understand the complexity of eligibility and admissibility criteria for refugees. But here's what I can say right now. So phase 2 is going to create a new pathway for refugees to access U.S. refugee resettlement. Right now, you need to either be individually referred by UNHCR or have an extremely close family member, so spouse or child in the U.S. That you're reuniting with, or be part of any particular groups that have been predefined by the State Department. This is going to actually provide another pathway into this resettlement pipeline. By being referred by private sponsor groups. We know that because this is a refugee program, it will only be accessible to people who are outside their home countries. If you are inside your home country, legally speaking, you are not a refugee. If you're displaced but haven't crossed a border, then you would be internally displaced. If you've crossed an international border into another country, then you might be an asylum seeker, you might be a refugee, you might be in a refugee-like situation. There's lots of nuance there. So if someone is still in their home country, then they are likely not going to be eligible. If they're in a neighboring country, then it's going to depend on the specifics of the country. And those specifics are going to be available towards the end of this month or early next month. I hope that that's helpful. I know that it's very non-specific.
And if you are interested in finding out more about that, I have been collecting the details of all the individuals who are interested in that particular phase. So again, once the email with the recording goes out today, there will be my email in there. Please email me. I would love to add you to that list of interested individuals. And once we get that information, then we'll reach out to you and we can have hopefully more concrete conversations once we actually know the details. So there is one other question in the chat from Monica. Are there possibilities of settling refugees in groups for emotional support from each other? I don't know if Andrea or Marion, you want to take that?
I can start and then maybe pass over to Marion.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good way to think about this in terms of, right now there's how many different communities all represented in one space. If there are multiple private sponsor groups forming in the same area and you're able to connect newcomers together to provide each other with a sense of community, I think that could be very special. In terms of the countries of origin people are coming from, a lot of folks that are getting matched right now are coming from the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Not all of them are, but a large number are. There's also folks coming from Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. So this is the region that most of the initial matches are coming from. So if there are multiple private sponsor groups in the same area, I think creating a support network is a really beautiful idea. And then I will also say, if you want to have individuals who are part of multiple sponsor groups, one person can be part of 2 sponsor groups, but your sponsor group can only settle one family at a time. So if you wanted to form one group that welcomes 5 families, that wouldn't be possible right now. But if there were 5 groups and each group was sponsoring one family, that would work. And Marion, I don't know if you have anything to add about your experience with your community sponsoring multiple families. I know you formed separate teams, separate groups, and each had their own program. I don't know how much overlap there was.
Andrea, was that a question to me? My internet bopped out in a minute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to share anything about your experience with your congregation forming multiple sponsor group teams in the same.
Yeah. So actually, Monica, that was exactly what ended up happening. Is we sponsored one family, co-sponsored actually with CWS when the Afghan groups first started arriving, and the brother of the husband was also here and needed a sponsor. So then that was the second one, and they were able to support each other, and our teams were able to share knowledge with each other and with them. And then the third family who we worked with as a highest welcome circle was someone who had been evacuated from Afghanistan by the cousin of a congregant, and did that project. And she spoke enough English that she was able to really help logistically with the other families, as well as providing emotional support. And then the fourth family was someone who they had met along the way, that family 3 met along the way, and they were also able to provide interpretation support. And there's a lot of social support that passes to each other. And I think, thinking about groups coming from sub-Saharan Africa, there are a lot of Return Peace Corps volunteers in our area who might actually even speak some of the languages. I'm not sure how big a population there is of people from that area who resettled here already, but I think there are in Durham through the 2 resettlement agencies that are based here. So there's definitely some potential for support in that way and community.
Thank you. I know we're at time. There was one more question about phase 2. I'm glad there's so much interest about phase 2. It's really an incredible opportunity. So again, anybody who has questions about that, I'll be happy to answer questions once we know more. I put my email in the chat. One last question in terms of fundraising, which I know is a very important piece that everybody wonders about, I think for good reasons. Gail, you said that you're currently working with a family of 6 from Syria, and essentially a family of 6 would be over $14,000, and that you're not sure that you would be able to raise anywhere near that much. And we know that is a concern and reality. So I don't know if Andrea or Marion, you want to talk about fundraising, since you've been doing that with groups a lot over the last 2 years.
There's lots of ways, depending on the size of your group. I think as people are reaching out, it's actually not been as hard to fundraise in many ways as I think a lot of us expected. That people genuinely want to help. I think for many faith traditions and community views, people want to welcome the stranger. They want to do that work, and there's possibilities through the sponsor fund of that $5,000 grant for groups that are certified as Welcome Corps groups. But GoFundMe is one option if your faith community can serve as a fiscal sponsor, so that contributions coming in to a refugee fund at your church are tax deductible for the donors. We have found that has been really helpful, that people tend to add a 0 to their contributions, or just they're more generous when they feel that there's some oversight. So that's a really strong element there. I think as people reach out members of your core team and members of the congregation, if you're getting it out through newsletters and through other means, people tend to be able, and make it easy for people to give online. People tend to be very generous, and the funds have come in either funding or in-kind contributions. Some people will give gift cards to the grocery store, and that's effectively cash. People can spend those on things that SNAP doesn't cover, for example. And refugees and newcomers through Uniting for Ukraine and others are eligible for public benefits. So they're eligible for Medicaid, they're eligible for SNAP, they're eligible for WIC if they fit that model, they're eligible for temporary assistance to needy families, following those requirements. So it's not entirely on you and your circle. Groups have had concerts, groups have done some really creative things to fundraise and get people engaged. It's a really nice way to invite the larger community in to support the work that you're doing.
And I would add that Welcome Corps will not match you with a bigger family than you have the resources to support. So if you have a concern that your resources for a family of 6 wouldn't be big enough, but maybe you have enough resources for a single individual or 2 people. There are single people, there are parent and child, there's couples with no kids, there's any family makeup you can think of are in need of resettlement. And so if you think I can't do this because I don't have enough money to sponsor a family of 6, there's any person who is in need would welcome the chance to be supported, no matter the family size. So if you have a certain amount of money, you can say, I can support a family of up to this size, and you won't be matched with any bigger family than that.
And a lot of people have looked at what the cost of a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom home would be in the area. And, the goal is to make it affordable for the newcomer after the sponsorship period ends. So if it's a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom is too expensive, then you can adjust your family size, the family size that you're able to sponsor, down to what will be affordable for them and what is affordable for your team.
Okay, thank you. We didn't have the opportunity to do that. We were just in the family, and then, but they only required, Church World Services only required $2,500 for everybody. And then, we've spent more. But thank you.
Yeah, the co-sponsorship programs, each local organization sets their own parameters and how they run their programs. So yeah, there's when you're working with co-sponsorship, always going to be differences from each office to office. So it is wonderful that you've been there for this family.
Well, I know we are 8 minutes past, which is I guess that's a good thing. I'm glad people had questions, but I don't see any more questions in the chat. If there are any, I think I put my email in the chat multiple times. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Feel free to reach out to us. And I think, again, Rachel is going to send a recording, our details later on today. So I don't know if Jennifer, you want to close us out?
I am happy to close this out. Thank you for this great information. I just want to say what I should have said up front. We have had a lot of inquiries at the council for refugee information. And so this has been very timely and well needed. So thanks to our friends. Be sure to look for that email that will come from us this afternoon and share that with your other friends who may not have been able to join us today. That's why we record everything, and it will be archived on the council website for future reference and information.
Thank you for having us. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.